Hi everyone, I'm Pastor John from New Life Assembly, and as we continue in our daily devotionals, I want to focus on Song of Solomon chapter 8, the final chapter of this book of love and love poetry and love music. And as we look at today, we're going to see a couple of different images between today and tomorrow. And some of them are going to be really culturally driven by Middle Eastern culture. They're not going to be understandable to us, and so we'll take a closer look at them. Let's get into the book and look at the last chapter of the Song of Solomon. Song of Solomon chapter 8, verses 1 through 7. And the woman is speaking here, and she says in verse 1, "Oh, that you were like a brother to me, who nursed at my mother's breasts. If I found you outside, I would kiss you, and none would despise me. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, she who used to teach me. I would give you spiced wine to drink, the juice of my pomegranate. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Who is that coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? Under the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she who bore you was in labor. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is strong as death, jealousy is fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised." As we look at chapter 8, verses 1 through 7, there are a couple of images here that are kind of strange to us Westerners. And so I want to talk about this. I've actually mentioned it before in another part of the book, when you have the brother-sister relationship, and Solomon calls Shulamith his sister, his bride. Well, here you have Shulamith saying, "I wish you were like a brother to me." Now, this is, once again, not about incest. This is a cultural thing. You see, in the culture of the Middle East, even today, men and women in the public square are not allowed to be so open with their affections. In fact, in some places and in some cultures, they don't even talk to one another in public, let alone touch and become anywhere near intimate. Even a kiss is extremely pushing the limits of their social conventions. Now, see, we're not used to that because in America, you can walk through a park and find lovers making out in the most random of places. But in the Middle Eastern culture, in Israeli culture, men and women did not give public displays of affection, even if they were married. They would not do that in public. It was reserved for private time, or in their house and in their own bedroom. They wouldn't propagate that kind of action in public. And so Shulamith here is rather unhappy with her social conventions. She's stuck with just walking alongside of Solomon instead of doing what she really wants to do. Even in public, she wants it to be private. She wants to get away. She wants to spend time with him alone together and not worry about what other people think. And that's really what the issue is in verses 1 and 2 here. She wants him to know, look, if it were socially convenient, I would totally start kissing you right now. But it's not. And so she says, "I wish you were like a brother to me." And the reason she says that is because a brother and sister had more freedom in the culture than any other two people in public. Now, it's not that brothers and sisters were openly kissing one another or doing anything like that at all. It's just that a brother and sister could talk with one another in public. They could hug one another. They could hang out together. And that's what she's going for. She's going for that, if we were brother and sister, we'd be able to talk to one another and nobody would question it. We'd be able to do whatever we wanted and nobody would question it. And that's her issue, is that she wishes that her private life was all her life and that she didn't have to endure the the social conventions and the cultural conventions of her day. As we read on, she continues to go deeper into her desire. Now remember, before they were married, she had the same type of desire to lead him away to her mother's chamber and to enjoy him fully, and for him to enjoy her fully in a physical way. But of course back then it was just a desire. She didn't act upon it. Well, here she could act upon it because they're married. She could take him away and say, let's go away, let's spend some time alone. And so this is her desire. She is expressing the desire to be private whenever they have to be public, because she would much rather be with him than be doing anything else. And then the imagery continues, I would give you spiced wine to drink, the juice of my pomegranate. It's exactly what it sounds like. She's propositioning him. She's saying, listen, let's go away. Let's get out of here. Let's go to a private place. Let's do what we really want to do anyway. And not worry about people going, So the idea here is the social conventions are keeping them apart. Throughout the book of Song of Solomon, you'll realize that there are certain barriers to love. Before they're married, there's barriers to acting upon that love. When they're married, there's barriers that come from, being selfish, that come from having to work for a living, that come from having to be in public. And so we witness another one here. This barrier for them is that they have a public life as well. And they can't just live together and stay in bed all day with one another. They have to live life and obey the social conventions. And so within your marriage, there's always going to be certain barriers to the way that you really feel. And they could be social, they could be political, they could be economic. There's so many different boundaries and layers to your relationship. And she's trying to work all this out. How do I get him and me where we want to be and not be stuck with this barrier that we are hitting right now in our relationship? And so as we continue on, she tells us her desire. Beyond the spiced wine and the pomegranate, she gives us one more. She says, and we've seen this before in the book, his left hand is under my head, his right hand embraces me. This is a desire for sexual intimacy with Solomon, even while she's standing there beside him in public and can't have what she's wishing for because of the social convention. She can have it legally and relationally because they're married. And so she is, once again, saying social conventions are keeping me from what I really want to do with my beloved. And this is why, for the third time, the final time, we have this refrain in the book that is one of the two main themes of the book of Song of Solomon, and that is, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. You see, she would love to physically have Solomon right there, but the social conventions don't allow it. And so there she is, desiring him, wanting him, having that urge, and not being able to fulfill it for one reason or another throughout the book. And so it teaches us that love is dangerous. It's hard to control. It's an urge. It's something that becomes something that we have to have. And because of that, we need to get married if we're having that passion for one another. Paul says that in 1 Corinthians 7. He says, if you cannot stop burning with passion for someone, then you need to marry them so that you can burn with passion for them in a biblical and God-honoring way. And so this is what Shulamith is saying. She's saying even after marriage, there are social conventions that don't allow me to fulfill my desires and my passions for Solomon at every waking moment. And so she just warns one more time, love is dangerous. You get involved, you don't have a plan, you don't have a way to get out of it, a willpower to avoid the problems that it will cause. This is what she's saying in this theme, that you don't awaken love until it's time. Because when you awaken love, it's like a monster. It's hard to control. And she introduces in verse 5 another scene. So the first scene is that they're socially in the streets. They can't connect as she would wish to connect. And then in verse 5, who is that coming up from the wilderness? leaning on her beloved. Under the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she who bore you was in labor. All right, so this is the image now. They're walking up from the wilderness. It's reminiscent of chapters 3 and 4 whenever she came up from the desert to marry Solomon. And so it's that same kind of imagery, and then you have the imagery of them, of her leaning on him. And many scholars suggest that as she is leaning on him, they are now talking about how they have grown old together in their love. And even still in their old age, they desire one another and they long to be with one another. And he is her strength. She leans on him for support in her old age. The idea here is that they're still together. In verse 5 at the end there, when they're talking about being under the tree, and she talks about Solomon's mother being in labor with him when he was a boy, they're reminiscing how wonderful it was to have met, to have gotten to know one another, to have fallen in love, to have married, to have lived life to their full. And so she's, basically saying, I'm so thankful that your mother had you, and bore you so that I could have known you. And that's kind of the idea of the ending of Song of Solomon here, is that they're reminiscing about how everything had to happen in the right time and the right place for them to be together. In verse 6, we're going to finish with this. She displays 4 images of love that help us to understand how love truly is. The first is a seal upon your heart or your arm. A seal, we're not talking about a Tupperware seal where you pop the lid. It's not a lid. It's the seal that you would take a signet ring and you would push it onto the paper. And when you pushed it onto the paper, it would then create, in the hot wax, it would create the crest of the king or whatever the case may be. A seal is a sign of ownership throughout the Bible. And so what we have here is her saying, when we're in love, we belong to one another. You are mine and I am yours. Now this is affirmed by the Bible's approach to marriage. In marriage, the husband belongs to his wife and the wife belongs to her husband. And that is how it works. The second image is the image of death and the grave. Love and jealousy being as strong as death and the grave. They pull at you like death does. They're inescapable. They're impossible to get rid of. It's a very romantic setting for these 4 images. The third one that she mentions is the flame of the Lord, or fire. Fire is uncontrollable. It's dangerous. It's something that you might have a hard time controlling. So all of these are talking about a passionate love for one another and how that plays out. And so the final one that she introduces is that of wealth. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. Love is greater than wealth. It's greater than money. There's a saying, the best things in life are free. Love is free. You can't earn it. You can't buy it. True love, I mean. You can buy just about anything, but you can't buy love. Love is something that must be given. It must be a gift. It must be a free gift. And so she ends on this note of, Solomon's very rich, and together they're very wealthy as king and queen. But she says love is way more important than any wealth. If a man tried to buy love with his wealth, he would be despised, because nobody can buy love. Love is a free gift from one human being to another, and it's best understood within the bounds of marriage. As we talk about love, I want to talk about Christ and the church just a little bit. Christ loved you and me so much that he was willing to give his very life. He died upon a cross so that you and I might know him and live with him forever in eternity. And that's a precious gift. We call it salvation. It's a wonderful, blessed gift that God has given. And the New Testament was written to show us that there's nothing I can do to gain God's love. God already loves me. It would be like trying to own something that I already own. It's a waste of my time, because God has already graciously offered it to me. Now the problem is that I have to decide that I want that love, that I want to live for him, that I want to love him back, that I want to show him how much I love him. And so as we talk about Christ and the church, Christ draws the church to himself in love. And the New Testament actually uses some of these same images when it talks about Christ and his church. For instance, the Holy Spirit is a seal of salvation upon the believer, a seal used in the same way that it is here. And in Hebrews, he talks about our God being a consuming fire who wants to dwell with us, who wants us to live holy so that he can be with us. And these are just a couple of the images that are refocused in the New Testament. And so I want to challenge you today, as you think about love for a minute, just think about what love really means and how it is for you and how you desire the person that you are in love with and how we desire to live for Christ and to be with him. Love is one of the most powerful forces in all of the universe. And this book that was written about it does not explain it in scientific terms. It explains it in terms of the heart, in terms of the emotions of a person, because love starts there. Now it can be made into a commitment to continue on with somebody despite how you feel or what's going on. But love starts as an emotion and it ends as a will to continue to be with someone. And so I hope this blesses you today, and I hope you have a great day as you think about love. And first of all, the love and relationships with human beings, but most of all, the love of Christ for each and every one of us. Have a blessed day in the Lord.